Well, it's January. Time to set sail for another year, isn't it? And as I told the crew this morning, we are already 1/24th of the way through, are we not? We've already wiped out an entire half of a month. And you know what? I've never started church this late in a year. Huh? The 15th? Wow. So, unusual year. Catching up's hard to do, isn't it? No one likes to fall behind. Boy, I don't like getting behind in my Bible reading. Oh, it's like I'll never catch up. There have been years I'm reading like a madman in December. Well, I hate getting behind. And if you read through the entire Bible in a year, and you're like in Isaiah, December 1st, you got to get through Jeremiah and Ezekiel. Those are long books. Hard to catch up. So it's January 15th. Don't get too far behind, all right? And once again, if you want one of these books, grab one on the way out. That's one of the great things. You realize that's one of the beauties of online giving. You think about it. If you give, like say with a check or whatever, in the box on the way out, you almost haven't given like in a month. Now, I'm just telling you, this doesn't always happen, but what happens a lot of times is that money got spent and you don't catch up. You just don't. It's hard to catch up. So now those of you that give online, you didn't even notice, and you got it, it's set up, it's automatic, nothing to worry about. And with the new year, for a lot of people it brings hope, and some people have resolutions, and a lot of resolutions don't make it past January 31st, and maybe some have already gone by the wayside, and maybe your waistline has expanded, so your focus now is on eating healthy and exercising and all that, and that'll work for a couple of weeks and then be something else. Could be finances because your credit card bills from all those Christmas gifts. By the way, I'm wearing one of my Christmas gifts, so Carol got me a new shirt. So I'd look a little better. Y'all were getting embarrassed over my clothes size. Said that. But I only got one new shirt. Now, Heather did get me a sweater, so if it gets cold enough, I'll wear the sweater. I was going to wear the sweater last week because it was colder, but y'all didn't show up, so you didn't see my sweater. And then, of course, and then some of you will. You'll start tithing this year. You will, and you'll go. And you may start giving online and go online, and that's great. And then some of you, it'll be some other spiritual decision, and you will realize soon enough that you're fighting a spiritual war. Because do you realize how hard it can be to manage the clock, and then add in your lack of discipline, and then your incessant need for inspiration before you jump into action? Wow. Have you ever noticed that a lot of times you're not inspired to do something, but then once you go do it, you can't stop? You just do it. But a lot of times we're waiting for inspiration. So here's what I want to do today. Before I get back to the book of Acts, I want to give you my top 4 thoughts about a new year. All right? Now, these aren't in your notes, but these are really good. So you might want to write them down. I'm just telling you. When you set your sails, you're hoping to catch some of the most favorable winds of the year. But here we go. Number 1, most people don't talk or start the new year thinking about the mundane. After all, this could be your best year ever. In fact, all kinds of titles out there. They're infinite. I'll just give you one. 10 things to do to make it your best year ever. Now, I want to camp here for just a moment. Let me just start by saying, listen, I'm all for goals, dreams, shoot for the stars, and all that. And even this year, so this year, one of the things I'm doing, I'm going to spend the entire year in the book of Exodus. All right? And then one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write down 365 thoughts from the book of Exodus. So I've written down about 30 so far, but I'm going to write down 365. So I guess you could say that's a goal. Now that's just preliminary. I'm just writing down a sentence or two, and then I'll come back next year and maybe write a little more. I don't know. But I'm hoping to teach through the book of Exodus in a couple years, and so I'm doing a little preliminary work. Takes me a while, all right? I kind of have sketched out what I'll preach over the next 2 or 3 years, you know, but we'll see. Exodus isn't this year, and it's not next year, but it might be 2019, all right? But you're not worried about that, neither am I right now. So let's talk on. So I've been reading through Moses. And now Moses grew up really with some pretty great ambitions and dreams. He grew up in the house of Pharaoh. He grew up in the palace, so he's surrounded by the best of the best. And then about 40 years old, he thought he would be the guy to deliver Israel. And so he went out one day and even killed an Egyptian, and that didn't turn out so well. So he winds up in a desert herding sheep for 40 years. No more goals. No more ambitions. Just happy, living in obscurity. Now here's what I know. You cannot do a seminar on the new year and entitle it, How to Get to the Top by Doing Nothing. Are you with me? And for 40 years, Moses was a loser in today's terminology. No. What do you want to do? Just flip hamburgers the rest of your life? Tend a bunch of sheep? Walk away. What a loser. What a loser. No more dreams, Moses? And then we read in Exodus 3:1, now Moses was keeping, he was still, you could add in the word still flipping hamburgers, still keeping the flock of his father-in-law Jethro. So he led his flock to the wilderness, and he came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And the sense here is that God's not in a hurry. That'll drive most of us crazy. And I doubt that Moses understood that God had been preparing him for 40 years. Because we live by sight. And to go through the ordinary humdrum activities of life, that's just not, that just doesn't float when it comes to chasing dreams. Well, anyway, so Moses living a normal life. And then one day, he's out there with a bunch of sheep, and a bush catches his attention, catches fire. I mean, that'd catch your attention too. And as we say, the rest is history. Now, all I do is say that to tell you is to give you hope. Because not everybody is wired to chase a big dream. And not everybody starts the new year off with audacious goals, and it almost sounds sinful to say, that's okay. It's okay. Well, on it goes. The mundane, the everyday life in the trenches. We're getting ready to look at a shipwreck in Paul's life. The well-known author Donald Miller said, I've rarely experienced a setback that didn't prove to be a pruning bearing more fruit in the end. It almost always works out that way. And we've traveled along with Paul for quite some time now through the book of Acts. We met him in Acts chapter 9. We actually met him earlier at the end of chapter 7 when Stephen was stoned. And he's gone through quite a bit, but right now we're going to find him on a ship. And we have found him at various points in his journey, just spinning his wheels, going nowhere. Kind of like David. In 1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 17, the Bible says that Jesse said to David his son, take for your brothers an ephah of this parched grain and these 10 loaves, and carry them quickly to the camp to your brothers. Now, I remember in construction, you didn't like being the gopher. So it came to be about like 9 o'clock, 9:30. Hey, could you take up the coffee order and run down to the 7-Eleven? And you're thinking, I am the peon out here. So you got to walk around, 8, 9 guys, whatever. Get your piece of paper. Didn't have cell phones where you could write it down. See, hey, what do you want? I want a coffee and I want a cherry pie. Okay, you write it down. Everybody gives you their money. That was in the days of cash, you know. So, you know, and everybody, you got to run down to 7-Eleven, get their stuff, and bring it back. And you kind of feel like, you are the lowest man on the totem pole out there. You know what I mean? And that's where I was much of the time. And I know some of you are thinking, but I thought you were the boss's son. It didn't matter, okay? I mean, look, it's just the way it was. So I made enough trips to the 7-Eleven. I was thankful for the days of the roach coats. That's the truck that comes around, and after you beat the roaches off your food, you just get your own stuff. Okay. I want you to understand, that's what David was doing. So David says, hey, your boys are out on the job. They're doing the important stuff in the military, but you know, here's their order, so to speak. So could you make the 7-Eleven run and go down? All right, I'll do it. Let me just say something. Every now and then you'll hear me say, that alone should keep you going in your faith. And this is one of those moments. Because what do you know that God might use just one of those casual moments just to run down to the 7-Eleven store to catapult your life to a whole new sphere. David was just running an errand. Now, I've never heard anybody say, hey, if you want to go to the top this year, I want you to chase every errand with all the gusto you got. This guy's a joke. So David was running an errand, and then it was back to tending the sheep. Now, I bet you, nobody in here put on their top 10 list for 2017 running errands. Anybody write that down? I didn't think so. Ray Kroc, 52 years old. He's just doing what he always did, selling multi-mixers. And then he noticed one day that the two McDonald brothers bought 6. He wasn't doing anything special that day. He's just selling multi-mixers. He noticed the guys needed 6 new ones. He got an idea. He's like, this could work. And as you know, the rest is history. 52 years old. Built one of the best franchises in all of human history. Just do it. Look, listen. Ray Kroc didn't wake up with a big dream. He didn't chase an audacious goal. He was just running an errand one day, selling mixers. That's all. Now, I know people have big dreams. Walt Disney had big dreams. I'm not saying don't have them. If God gives it to you, have it. But if he doesn't, don't feel left out. Just keep running errands. Right? Maybe you're missing the big things because you're missing the small things. Years ago, I knew of 2 couples. Both couples showed me their dream homes hanging on the wall. Oh, nice house. But do you know what those couples forgot to do? Take care of the small things. One marriage, the guy had an affair. The other marriage, the wife had an affair. And you know what I know? The dreams win. They never saw those houses. Never, to this day. Never saw their dream. Because they didn't take care of the small things. Well, let me give you a second thought for the new year. Number 2, it's hard to share the details of your difficult situation. And there's a lot of truth when you say, well, you wouldn't understand. A lot of truth in that, because a lot of people wouldn't. I mean, you ever feel like your life's a mystery? I mean, you try to tell your story to someone else, and they'll most likely not get it. You know, so I went up to see a friend of mine. He's in the ministry up in Northern Virginia. And so I went up and saw him Friday, and we got to talk a little bit. So then on the way home, I stopped by to see 2 guys I went to high school with, and they work in the same business. And so I stopped. The one guy wasn't there, but the one guy was. And the one guy goes to my friend's church now. Now, you have to understand, when I grew up, I witnessed to this guy. I didn't get anywhere, and so, you know, he's my age. He's a few months older. I mean, he was born, I think his birthday's in December, and mine's in April and all that. So he's already he's already, so anyway, we grew up together from the time we were kids, hunted anyways, long story. And so he's been going to my friend's church for about 3 years now, okay? 3 years or more, all right? And so he told me, he said, you know, Barry, that's his name, that's my friend's name. He said, Barry mentioned that the ministry can be really hard on a pastor's family. And I just thought it was interesting that he brought that up, and I only stopped for 5 minutes. And I thought, because most people, listen, unless you're in the ministry, look, I get it. You don't get it. I mean, look, I don't share a lot because I just don't have time to break it down. And so, I mean, if I tell you listen, you got your stuff, I got some of my stuff, and a lot of our stuff is different, but I understand a lot of your stuff because I got stuff, you know what I mean? And I don't sit up here and try to tell you, well, when you're in a ministry, you know, you got this, and you're thinking about this, and you're carrying somebody's load, and somebody's going through this, and then you're carrying the load because you're the pastor. And I'll be honest with you, there's one thing I always thank God for. You know, every time, you know, God sends me somebody, or sends us somebody to New Hope, it's like I have this, not an instant love, and I don't know what the word I'm looking for, but it's like I was thinking about this week, and I'm like, you know, I love everybody that comes to New Hope. And I'm glad, because it would bother me if I'm in the ministry and I didn't care about what bothered you or what you cared about. Anyway, but I thought it was interesting that he brought that up. But I do know that sometimes you feel like it's difficult to share the details of your difficult situation. And what will happen is, though, you'll keep it inside. And really, you need to be able to connect with people or others where you can share. That's all. All right, number 3. I'm going to probably run out of time, but y'all weren't here last week, so I might go a few minutes extra, all right? So you may have to text and cancel that 11:30 date or something. I don't know. Panera Bread. Number 3. Believers are often guilty of leaving God out of their reckoning. Okay, so since I'm in Exodus here, just bear with me. You're going to hear a few illustrations out of Exodus, okay? But it's all good. So Moses said to God, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the children of Israel out of Egypt?" And God says, "But I'll be with you." Oh, Moses, you weren't even considering I was going to be there. He said, "This will be a sign for you," and then he gives them. So Moses feels inadequate and unqualified. And yet God says it has nothing to do with your educational background or your talents, Moses. It just doesn't. my divine presence. And I would like to camp there for a moment, but I can't. Will be more than sufficient to handle the challenges and the obstacles that come along in your life. So here's what I know in 2017. In one sense, you can't, but he can. All right, I got to give you number 4. I can't stay. Journeys rarely start off bad. Hey, we're just 15 days into the new year. And so my guess is that so far, so good. Okay? I mean, I don't know. Maybe you've already hit your whatever, but probably most of us, well, so far, so good. Okay? So if the rest of the year goes so well as the first 15 days, I'm good. All right? But then life happens. Now, I'm not trying to set you up for a doggy downer year. At the same time, I don't want you to come to some type of Pollyanna optimism where everything's always great. Everything's always great. You know, you see somebody, how you doing? Doing good. No, you're not. But you don't have time to say, well, I'm not doing that well right now. I mean, I know, so we just say we're doing great. We're always great. There's an old hymn that says when we walk with the Lord, here's what it says. Not a shadow can rise, not a cloud in the skies, but his smile quickly drives it away. That's not true. Can I help you out a little bit? That's not true. That's like what you call poetic license. You just say things that sound good, but they're not true. The scriptures don't teach that. Okay? I don't want to bust your bubble. And if we were to sing that hymn and you raise your hands, oh yeah, his smile drives it all away quickly. Doesn't happen. Okay? Bye. So Acts 27, Paul takes a voyage, gets on a ship. And this voyage that the Apostle Paul takes is a metaphor for life. And here's what I know. I don't want my diet to derail me. Now, you know, I was doing so well. I really was not eating many desserts at all until Thanksgiving came around. I don't think I've gone a day without a dessert almost. And then Heather will make me stuff. And, okay, she calls the other day. How many cinnamon buns would you? I told Carol, okay, no more than 6. Because I can only eat 1 a day, not 2. And then Carol, she'll eat 1 or 2. And hopefully I'll eat them before gate. I mean, I love them. They're good. I mean, I don't know. And I don't want my addictions to afflict me. I don't want to be addicted to something, even if it's sports or football, that's going to afflict me and hurt me in the long run. I don't want to have habits that hurt me. I'm always trying to analyze my habits. My study habits, prayer habits, reading habits. I don't want those to hurt me. And I don't want my leadership to level me. So I wrote some of those things down for a new year. And I say that because here's the deal. Paul is getting on a ship. He's going to go through a shipwreck. And here's the deal. Through no fault of his own. No fault of his own. We create enough storms in our own lives. Do we not? So, let's throw karma out the window because we will create enough messes. But all I'm saying is Paul did not create the mess he found himself in. So, now this particular chapter, Acts 27, it is in great detail about how people traveled the seas in the first century. And I don't have time to get into it, but a guy by the name of James Smith wrote a book in the 1800s, took the same journey, charted it all out. He was amazed how accurate Luke was when he wrote this. Anyway, that's all stuff you can find elsewhere. I don't have time to drill down into it, but here we go, verse 1. And it's almost 11 o'clock, and I'm on verse 1. So here we go. We are going to fly the friendly skies of New Hope Church right now. Here we go. Number 1. And when it was decided that we should sail for Italy, they delivered Paul. Now, Paul's been in jail, prison. He appealed to Rome. Okay, it's time to go to Rome. Boom, here we are. So he gets on the ship with other prisoners. And so they get on the ship, go along the coast, and he's got a couple of friends, Aristarchus, and also Luke is with him, and Luke's doing the writing. And anyway, so Julius treated Paul kindly and gave him leave to go to his friends and be cared for. So he gets a prisoner. They go up the shore 60, 70 miles, stop, and the guy lets Paul, a prisoner, go to shore. That's weird. Is it not? You're like, you trust, he's a prisoner. Yeah. In that short amount of time, Paul had gained the centurion's trust. Now here's what I want to just point out from what I see in the text. Number one, I've kind of already alluded to this. Take care of the small things because they're really the big things. Number one, be a faithful friend. Who's on the ship with Paul? Aristarchus and Luke. They've been through a lot. Go back to the book of Acts. They've gone through a lot. I love Oprah's quote, one of my favorites of all time. Everyone wants to ride with you in a limo, but what you want is someone who will take the bus with you when the limo breaks down. Huh? Is that not true? Fair weather friends are a dime a dozen. Huh? Wow. They're still there, getting on the boat with Paul, who's chained to a guard. Man, they're still there. And you know what? They have no idea how bad it's about to get on this ship. Okay? Anyway, hang with me. Number two, I don't know if it's in your notes, be trustworthy. Because Paul's a prisoner, and I'm just going to say that and move on. Trust takes a while to gain, but you can lose it in a moment. But Paul quickly gained the reputation of being someone who was trustworthy. So they put out to sea. They sailed under the lee of Cyprus because the winds were against us. And when we had sailed across the open sea along the coast, and it just talks about all this. So some of this text, I got to go along quickly because our time is short. The speaker has gotten, taking a little too long and that sort of thing. So let me give you another point. This year, take the initiative, and I'll tell you why. Let's go on verse 9. So, much time had passed, and the voyage was now dangerous. Okay, they're just the times of the year you didn't sail. Typically, November through February, you didn't sail in the Mediterranean. Now, interesting enough, Caroline, when we celebrated our 30th anniversary a few years ago, we sailed pretty much the same area, during this time of year in December, late November, early December. And we encountered some of the high winds, and the boat was rocking, and and this is a huge cruise ship, all right? And you couldn't go out on the deck some. Just the weather didn't cooperate. So now go back to the first century, what it was like in their boats. A boat that's 150 feet long, maybe 200 feet long. We're on a cruise ship that's like 1,000 feet long. So way different. But anyway, now Paul is a landlubber. But if you know anything from Paul's life, he's already been in 3 shipwrecks. 3. He's not inexperienced. He was an experienced traveler on the sea. So, he wasn't totally clueless. So he took the initiative and he told the experienced guys on the ship, I don't think it's a good idea. I think we should just stay in Fair Havens. Now, I don't know who named Fair Havens. Probably the head of the travel agency. It wasn't the type of place you want to stay in for the winter. And if you know anything about sailors who are on this ship, they want action, and it wasn't happening in Fair Havens. So nobody wanted to stay in Fair Havens but Paul. All right. He says, if we keep traveling, there's going to be injury and loss, cargo, the ship. Hey, we could lose our lives. But the centurion paid more attention to the pilot and to the owner of the ship. Now, they got stuff on ship, like cargo from Egypt, money. They got to get this stuff to Rome. So they decided to make a beeline for the next suitable harbor. So they did. But let me give you another thought. This is what you need in 2017. Use good judgment. Now, that sounds easy. Look at verse 13. Now, when the south wind blew gently, it's kind of like the old Johnny Cash song, I see the train a-coming, huh? They're like, we're putting out to sea. We've got a nice wind right now. This is a favorable wind. You ever think Satan could give you a favorable wind? Huh? Supposing that they had attained their purpose, they weighed anchor and they took off and sailed along creek close to shore. Number 2, fill this out though, seek out and listen to good advice. Because you know what I know this year? You're going to get some favorable winds. And you'll be enticed to buy something. Hey, you get this new car, 0 interest rate, no payment for 6 months. Whoo, that's favorable. I don't know. A lot of people look at favorable circumstances. That's the reason to jump. Really? That's it? That's all it takes? You know, I learned this from my dad, as Paul learned. He wasn't a sailor, but he learned from experience. My dad never was an iron worker. My dad was a crane operator. All right? So my dad just watched, and he watched how guys connected and put beams together, and he saw tough connections, and he saw what they had to do, and there'd be times he was running the crane, and now being his son, my dad had no problem yelling at me, and he would just yell at me, tell me how to do it. Okay, basically, I never remember him telling me how to do something I didn't know how to do, but he was my dad, so he thought he'd tell me how to do it anyway, and you know. But all I'm saying is my dad knew how to do stuff. He never did climb up there and do it himself, but he saw with his eyes. So, you know, seek good advice. Doesn't mean somebody doesn't have to be an expert to know. A lot of people have learned a lot through observation. Boy, there was a time in my life I couldn't swing a hammer without hitting the back of my head. And although I am a slow learner, because I did do it twice before I kind of caught on that didn't work too well, you know what I mean? And I started doing like this. Ooh, that feels so much better. A lot better than that, but anyway, so. All right, but soon. You know, don't you just hate that word soon? You know, have you ever done something stupid or said something stupid and it didn't take long, like 5 seconds, 5 minutes, and you realize that was dumb? You ever done that? We ought to just sit around after church today and talk about those times. Everybody just talk about how dumb you are at some point. Well, it didn't take long to realize that they made a bad decision. And as I said, you know, a lot of times we create our own storms. And then we complain. But anyway, that's another story. So they had a tempestuous wind called the nor'easter, hurricane-type winds. And I mean, it got a hold of that ship, and it just took it. And so they had to just let it go. And then they had to run cables and stuff underneath the ship to hold it together from breaking up. I mean, it was crazy. And it tossed the storm so bad, they had to start throwing the cargo out, money overboard. I mean, it was just bad. And then they threw the tackle overboard. I mean, it was just bad. This went on for a couple of weeks, eventually. Verse 20 of chapter 27, when neither sun nor stars appeared for many days. So for 2 weeks, the storm drove the ship. They didn't know where they were. The Bible says all hope of our being saved was at last abandoned. See what I mean about that hymn and the poetic license? They weren't smiling. You know, in your notes, write down, hold on to hope. You know, you ever ask yourself, why are there so many long periods of trials in the Bible? In Genesis 15:13, God came to Abraham and said, hey, your offspring, they're going to be afflicted for 400 years. If God sent you a tape, you'd say, I think I misheard that. You'd rewind the tape. Because that doesn't make sense. 400 years. I mean, why does life have to be so hard and trials so long? And here's what I know in life. Most of our lives will involve experiences without explanations. Now, it's nice when explanations come, but I want to remind you that they are few and far between. So out of 100 experiences, you might get one explanation. I've told this story in my own life because it's the only time that I've gotten an explanation that I can think of right now. Early in our marriage, I was working with my dad, and we were living in Lynchburg, and we were doing a job in Rockville, or up there somewhere, Rockville area, Shady Grove somewhere. And I fell. All right? So I fell. And, hit my head on the concrete, broke some ribs, ruptured my spleen, had to be operated on, 22 staples right here. I mean, got the scars to prove it. And I laid in the hospital. It was in mid-August. And, and I thought, man. So Carol, she came to see me. I was still in ICU. Of course, I'm all hooked up. And, but, it's one of those deals where I think my mom called Carol. My dad grabbed the phone because my mom doesn't know how to deal with the news, right? And my dad, his first word said he's okay because you at least want to know the bottom line, right? Well, anyway, so I'm okay. Well, at the time, in order to get the degree I wanted, I had to take an upper-level Hebrew class, and it met all during the week. And I couldn't quit my job. I mean, I didn't have enough money. I mean, there's no way I could quit my job and go to school. Carol and I had to go live in a tent in the woods or somewhere. But anyway, so we didn't know how it was going to work out. All right? Now, I'd already signed up for my classes. You're like, well, why'd you do that if you knew? Sometimes you just got to step out on faith. Now, I'm not saying God knocked me off the building. I don't know how all that worked out. He just used my stupidity to do it, So, and my dad, he tried to explain to me why I fell. He says, well, probably, Dad, it was just stupid, all right? Just admit I did something stupid, okay? That's why I fell. But when you have broken ribs, I mean, look, I'm not moving well. I stayed at my parents' house in Culpeper for a while because I was kind of immobile, really. I couldn't do anything. And and I don't remember how long I was there. It was probably about a week before I could even, walk, and move. So, when you break a few ribs, I mean, trust me, that's pretty painful anyway. So I'm missing, classes start, and I missed the first week of class. And I still remember, I don't remember what my Hebrew professor said, but my Greek professor, I was taking some upper-level Greek, too, and he wasn't happy. My Greek professor was awesome. I mean, he was awesome. He had studied under one of my great mentors from way back. I never met the guy, but he was a professor at University of Manchester. Anyway, another story you don't care about. So my professor studied under him, got his PhD there, and he was not happy until I told him the story of how I fell. Oh, that's But here's the cool thing. I'm on insurance till the end of November, which means I got 80% of my pay. Now get this, this was summertime, working overtime. You with me? So the way it worked out, I got 80% of my pay for 10 weeks or whatever it was until I could go back to work. Now back in those days, man, they're trying to get you off insurance and back to work as quick as they can. Well, anyway, I look back and I think, if I hadn't fallen, I couldn't have taken the class. I couldn't have got my degree. I don't know what would have happened. That was a terrible experience. I mean, you want to give up your spleen? You want all those staples? You want broken ribs? I mean, they do heal and all that. And all I'm saying is, I went through all that, got through my class, took the Hebrew and all that. And it's nice. And you know what? You only need one explanation, maybe. That'll go a long ways, because you're going to go through trial after trial after trial, storm after storm after storm. Oh, and by the way, I created that storm in my life. I did. Nobody knocked me off the building. Nobody pushed me off the building. I did it. But God used it. And maybe today you're here and you've created a mess in your life. You're like, whoa, I have created a real mess. Yeah, I've been there. I've been there. Explanations are helpful. There's always going to be mysteries. Here's what I want to ask you. You're in the storm. You're in the middle of the ocean. You have no idea what's going to happen. You haven't eaten in 2 weeks. There's no sign of land. Now what? Now what? What is going to anchor you in the storm? When all hope is gone. That's next week. And we're going to talk about how Paul's soul was anchored in the storm.